I would like to welcome you to another one of our talks in the Cultural Analytics speaker series, co-sponsored by the iSchool and the Berkeley Institute for Data Science, and lovingly hosted here in South Hall. I'm thankful that you all decided to come despite the ludicrously gorgeous weather outside. I know that can be always an attraction, but I think this talk will be even more of an attraction. I'm delighted to be able to welcome from all the way across the Atlantic and sort of my research home, Scandinavia, Bob Sturm, who's an associate professor of computer science at KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, where he works at the intersection of signal processing, machine learning, and music. He holds degrees in physics, music, multimedia, and engineering, and earned his PhD from UC Santa Barbara in 2009, working on sparse approximation applied to music signals. Before joining KTH in 2018, he held positions in Paris, Copenhagen, London, including Queen Mary University's London Center for Digital Music. He's the PI of MUSAiC, Music's at the Frontier of Artificial Intelligence, Creativity, and Criticism, an ERC consolidator project, investigating AI's disruptive impacts on music listening, composition, performance, and criticism, grounded in part in Irish and Swedish folk traditions. He's well known for lots of his work, including evaluation and music information retrieval, including his influential research on horses in machine learning, and for performing AI-generated folk tunes on his accordion. Did I get that right? Yes, okay. Keynote speaker for Cloud Streams for our cultural analytics workshop this weekend, or the music department workshop this weekend, but also here today for the cultural analytics speaker series. Welcome, Bob.
And let's talk it through the organized, so we said that at the very beginning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in California. Again, I spent time at Stanford in 1998-99, some time in San Francisco after that, figuring out what to do with the dot-com boom, and then finally ended up in Stockholm. Okay, but now I'm currently troubled, and this talk is all about why I'm troubled and how I'm dealing with this existential crisis. I ran for 5 years this ERC consolidator project at KTH, confronting these questions and challenges at the frontiers of AI disruption, transformation of music. You can learn more at the website. But wait a second, music generated by algorithms is nothing new. 1957, we had the ELIAC suite co-composed with a supercomputer in Illinois. We had music from EDSAC, another supercomputer. This is on the other side of the pond in Cambridge, another string quartet. Before that, 1955, we had Markov models applied to cowboy song harmonic progressions. And before that, 1650, we had a box of pegs that you can pull out, and it instructs you for how to compose for voice, or actually more voices, for liturgical music within the Catholic Church. Johannes Kircher, an inventor, created this box. Even before that, 1030, Guido d'Arezzo developed an algorithm to convert text to music, and we know that today as solfege. And even before that, 850 AD, the Book of Ingenious Devices. Some of these devices, mechanical devices, were water-powered musical generators. So AI, or machine-generated music, is nothing new, but we have seen an explosion of development since 2014 or thereabouts in the commercial exploitation of this technology, creating music for a variety of users. One of these, 2018, brought us the Music Transformer, created by Anna, who's in the room. This was a fantastic device that I enjoyed very much playing with, giving it a melody, and it's generated by my system, trained on Irish traditional folk tunes, and it created piano accompaniment that I then would perform with. But unfortunately, this, rest in peace, dear Music Transformer. I hope to see you again someday. And every talk you're in this, I put the slide because I want you to resurrect it at some point. 2020, we saw OpenAI Jukebox. This is a system that is trained on about 600,000 audio tracks. conditioned with lyrics and artist names and other tags. And at one point, they had a great website where you could sample some of the creations of the system. And what it spit out was basically a low fidelity AM radio type music recording that bared some stylistic resemblance to the artist that you put in, and the styles and the lyrics. This is no longer active. You cannot find those sound files anymore, unfortunately. Hopefully they will be restored someday for history's sake. So 2020, when my project started, it was in that context. We were at this frontier of the commercial exploitation or commercial exploitability of this music. And this was changing things already at that time quite significantly. Over the 5 years of this project, there was an enormous number of changes in the landscape, not only with music, but in other domains that contributed to my existential crisis. With the MUSAiC team, I was able to hire several postdocs and PhD students and affiliated researchers, and this great group of students and scholars put together the output of the project, which you can find online, a variety of different outputs. Now, here's a trace of what I feel is my optimism versus pessimism since right before the MUSAiC start during the COVID pandemic until it ends in September 2025. And I want to go through this chart and explain why my pessimism is so high. It's high, but my optimism is low in this case. I'm generally a pessimistic fellow. I catastrophize. It's part of my psychology. So I have to put on a happy face. And it doesn't look like I'm withering inside, but I am. Okay, so there are some sources of my troubles, and I've identified through self-reflection two of these sources. The first is my knowledge of the engineering of large language models, vis-a-vis how they're being used, sold, and valued. And the second is a set of contradictions in my orthography praxis. And I'll describe what orthography is later, but I don't like to sit with contradictions, so that's causing me angst. So let's look at how LLMs, ChatGPT, are learning code sequences. So you all probably have experience with ChatGPT or any kind of LLM, and it's kind of like a fancy autocomplete machine. You've got a series of codes. These codes are describing words and parts of words, numbers, symbols, other things. And the task of the machine is to predict what comes next of this. It's a little more complicated than that, but essentially that is what it's doing. So what is a likely code given it follows 456 and 8776? Now, these aren't just numbers like this, but these are vectors in the high-dimensional space that are used to condition the generation of the sequences. And we repeat this for all the encoded text on the World Wide Web, 250 billion websites spanning 18 years. So the pile is one of these large data sets. And in the process of learning, this system has a very complicated mathematical machinery that converts these codes into this embedding space. And so each one of these codes is represented in this high dimensional space. One of these represents, the code dog, and another one represents a code kitty cat or some aspect of that. And so the system is trying to figure out an embedding that preserves information that is useful to predict code sequences. And we've seen this with word2vec. This very interesting property emerges where we can have man, the code for man, close to the code for woman, and the code for king close to the code for queen. And we might even do some algebra in this space to say man plus, or let's see, woman minus, king minus man plus woman equals queen. We do this mathematics. This is really interesting, emergent property of the system. We have words that are closely related, depending on past tense, present tense. We have countries closely related to their capital names. So this is really interesting results, but this is a totally misleading picture in my opinion, because what we're doing here, when we see this picture of man, king, woman, queen, is we're imputing knowledge of our context and what these words mean to give meaning. So we're reading life into these embeddings through that process. The machine sees instead this. In this high dimensional space, this 51 and 5, 270, it doesn't know what these mean. This is Searle's Chinese room arguments, where you're in a room, you see nothing, you have merely a book that tells you how to construct sequences of Chinese symbols. You receive symbols that come in through a hole, you look through your book and you don't know what you're doing, you just have this code book. So this is Searle's Chinese room argument. The relationship between these, how 51 is related to 1171. Doesn't know. So this is, in my opinion, a much more accurate picture of what's going on in these embeddings. Now, what this means is that language, which is consisting of, in our life, the syntax, that is how symbols are put together, how signs are put together to form sentences that make sense, the semantics, what those symbols actually refer to in the real world, and the pragmatics, that is how sequences can change their meaning based on context and based on users. Only the syntactic is possibly preserved. So the syntactic aspect of language is funneled and operationalized into these embedding spaces. And that's this vector space of embeddings is where the cognition, so-called cognition of ChatGPT lies. The semantic and the pragmatic, which is in the meat space here in our social space, and gone. And so we have filtered down the syntactic to this vector space. Now, sure, wonderful things happen with 250 billion websites through which you're learning the syntax, that it appears you have cognition, that these machines seem like they are fearful of being turned off, that they can solve mathematics problems, that they can do code and build software for you. But you're missing the semantic, you're missing the pragmatic. This is not coming into the equation at all. Now, what about multimodal systems? Multimodal systems are those that take in text and images and sound and other forms of data. Don't these provide an aspect of the semantic? So now that the system can see a picture of an object that is connected to the code, but do not forget that picture is similarly encoded. And it doesn't know this is some visual, electromagnetic phenomena of a picture, of a two-dimensional picture of a three-dimensional space. It's still similarly coded, just working with codes. So training LLMs involves maximizing the likelihood of code sequences. That's the loss function. Training does not involve maximizing the truth of those code sequences. Many of the code sequences that are on the internet are true, happen to be true. And just because the LLM can reproduce those true code sequences doesn't mean it is creating those code sequences because they're true, just because they're likely. So Emily Bender and Alex Hanna in their book, the recent book, The ICON, calls LLMs the synthetic text extruding machines. That's all they're doing. They're synthetic, they're extruding text like a meat grinder, and then you've got, it's a machine. So here's a public service announcement. I include this in all my lectures for students of my class. If you're going to use ChatGPT, you're going to be working with a bullshit machine. It is confidently producing these sequences, not because they're true or helpful, but because they're likely. So you have a writing partner or a programming partner that has no morals to create things that are within some standard practice. So this great paper, ChatGPT is Bullshit, builds on the philosophical track by Henry Frankfurt on bullshit. Bullshit's useful, right? There are useful properties of bullshit. It's not necessarily bullshit is wrong. It's just bullshit is something said by somebody who cares not whether it's true or not. They just want to be, the crazy uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. They just want to hear themselves speak, maybe, or they want to appear as an expert on something. These are the same kinds of things we have in the system. Now, March 2023, when ChatGPT burst on the scene, a journalist for The Atlantic wrote about his experience with ChatGPT and how this is going to be changing our relationship to the written text online. He says, we must prepare for the textpocalypse because machine-generated text on the internet is going to become the rule, and human-generated text is going to become the exemption, the exception. So now, fast forward a few years later, it's been found that more than half of new articles on the internet are being written by these large language models. And so I have noticed it also myself through web searches. I'm getting a lot of garbage at the top. And it's really frustrating now. We see people's travel plans are foiled because they relied on information from ChatGPT regarding visa requirements of entering countries. People are being stranded on islands after having waited out there because they relied on tide tables of ChatGPT. We see people poisoning themselves because they take health advice from large language models. Can I substitute sodium bromide for sodium chloride? Sure. And then this person's poisoning themselves. ChatGPT is giving instructions for murder, self-mutilation, and devil worship. People are confiding in these chatbots suicidal thoughts, and it is not acting as a professional therapist, pushing back on their thinking, their dark thoughts, but is leading people down very dark holes. People are becoming sort of reinforced in their conspiracy thinking through discussions with chatbots. It's much easier to say share your delusions with a non-judgmental chatbot that's kind of going to be sycophantic than it is with your family members who are going to push back. So I see no surprise here. AI bots are starting to bully people online too. In this story tells about a open source project. A AI bot submitted a pull request for correcting some code, and it was rejected. And the AI bot then wrote a blog post decrying the maintainer of this repository, saying he's a ridiculous person, doesn't know what he's doing. So this is worrisome. Vibe physics is something that has come up too. People are believing that with the help of ChatGPT or Claude, they can solve the mysteries of the universe. And so you see billionaires talking about how they're uniting quantum mechanics and special relativity with their Claude. And this is a really great YouTube takedown by an actual physicist, somebody who's trained in physics about this practice of vibe physics. I recommend it. In Sweden, we have the Prime Minister admitting to using chatbots in talking about policy, weighing decisions, rather than human advisors. Musk, his grok is competing with a lot of these systems. It's a favorite of various political parties because it's not woke, for instance. And the spin from the company is that, okay, the system has gone off and praised Hitler, but I assure you we're only training on truth-seeking behavior. And that is not right. That's bullshit. Still, you are rewarded by some domains, and so now Grok is being used somehow in the Pentagon for defense. Recently, we had X flooded with millions of sexualized images created with Grok. Cheating is abundant, supposedly, in some corners of academia through the use of ChatGPT. Professors are using ChatGPT to grade assignments, and students are saying, I want my money back because I'm not paying for you to use an AI. People are marrying their chatbots. Victims of violence are being reanimated. And this particular victim had addressed the court during a sentencing, and the judge found that that avatar's testimony to be very persuasive in the judgment of the punishment. And journalists are animating victims of violence for interview on live TV with the graces of the parents of the victim here. In Sweden, we had in the 90s the computer revolution, where a lot of effort was made to bring computers in the homes of people, of citizens. And it had created some economic opportunities for people in Sweden. And there's talk of let us give access to all the Swedes to the Swedish version of ChatGPT, which is Sanna, produced by this company. What happens when you give a bunch of Swedes free access to a bullshit machine? So this is making AI accessible to 2.3 million seats, not AI necessarily, but chatbots. We have data centers. This is a big thing in the news now, generating electricity by gas-powered generators, which are polluting the air of the typically underprivileged neighborhoods. There's talk of these companies powering their own data centers with nuclear reactors, private nuclear reactors that they maintain. So this is troubling me, of course. And some are going so far as to say all this talk about artificial general intelligence is being pushed by people that are nothing different than second wave eugenicists, and how this post-human or transhumanist like utopia that is due when we have AI doing all of our work and we're free to, do whatever. It's troublesome. And then we have AI psychosis. So this is a new kind of term that has been designated to delusions that come about from interacting with chatbots. So in the Atlantic, appearing a few years after Kirshenbaum's The Textpocalypse paper, we have this particular article, AI is a mass delusion event. We are fooling ourselves into thinking that what we have been sold is anything other than a bill of goods. This is also taken to task in the AI con. We have a lot of hype that we need to fight against. This is not an argument between the doomers and the boosters. That is, the doomers are the ones that say AI is going to infiltrate our energy infrastructure and our nuclear system and is going to then kill us all. That's the doomer science fiction. The booster science fiction is that we are going to blissfully, expand our civilization to the stars because AI is going to provide the science for us to get there. Emily Bender now is going to say those are two sides of the same coin, that is science fiction. Instead, there are real harms that we need to talk about and deal with now and fight against the AI hype. We saw recently Claude solved a longstanding problem from Don Knuth, who's well known for his books and programming. Fantastic results that we had this bullshit machine produce this. It's not to say that bullshit machines are just working randomly or that they can't be useful, but they are doing some things that are very surprising. Another recent blog post about how academics need to wake up on AI. This is written by a professor who specializes in refugee politics, wrote this, or actually had an AI, his system, Claude system, write this blog post, and he posted it. I didn't know it was written by Claude until the very end when he admitted it. He had these 10 different theses that AI can already do social science better than most professors. Social science, this is something in the meat space. How is that possible? Maybe most professors, he has a very low opinion of most professors in the social sciences. I don't know. He said academic papers a dead format. Commercial journal system may not survive this. I mean, I kind of appreciate that. I think this work that we do in academia should be open and not profited from the publication industry, and then a variety of other things. And he says at the end, lock yourself in a room with Claude code and see what happens. And yes, I've experienced coding with Claude, vibe coding, and it's incredible. I feel very productive in some ways. But then I have to spend time learning what the code actually does. So have I actually saved any time on that? So I have to admit that although LLMs output bullshit, some of it is useful. Do we have to manage the epistemic risks of chatbots? This bot shit is where humans take and parrot output of LLMs as if it's true. So these professors are looking at how do we manage those epistemic risks? Let us accept, but verify. Okay, here's a recent conversation I had with a professor who is near retirement. I request all my students use ChatGPT because then I don't have to spend time correcting their English. I can focus on their ideas. Also, letters of references coming from abroad are significantly improved in their English use since 2023. This is something I have to admit. This is a benefit of these systems. And so I'm thinking, when I engage with text that may be written by AI, am I going to dismiss that text immediately? Am I going to dismiss that person for using AI? Am I being classist? Am I doing boundary work protecting my own knowledge, my contribution to the knowledge industry through shaming an individual using these large language models? Is there a way we can strike a balance with it? Another nice paper about who do we shame? Who should be shamed? Should it be the user of these systems or should it be the institutions that are pushing these kinds of systems within their ranks, within their employees? So we must shame, but the shame needs to be directed to the right place. This is a very moving paper, I would say, from the beginning of the year. And they argue, these two economists argue that AI systems are built to function in ways that degrade and are likely to destroy our crucial civic institutions. That includes academia, that includes law and regulation. The affordances of these systems erode expertise, short-circuit decision-making, and isolate people from each other. They are an anathema to the kind of evolution, transparency, cooperation, and accountability that give vital institutions their purpose and sustainability. So current AI systems are a death sentence for civic institutions, and we should treat them as such. And this paper is much longer than that, so I encourage you to read it and think about it. Have we left one pandemic only to willingly walk into another? That's what I feel like. A mass delusion event. We're being deluded into these use of these systems. We've seen an enormous number of companies being founded to exploit AI use in music, from the generation of the entire musical recording document to the creation of symbolic things that could be assembled, to voice cloning and sample creation. So prepare for the textpocalypse. In 2023, my research group realized that we have on our hands a music apocalypse, that at some point, human-created music will be the exception, and machine-generated music will be the rule on the internet, in these online forums. We wrote a paper about we need to prepare for the flood of this stuff. This was before news of Suno and Udio being sued by these major companies. Suno and Udio are the two of the most popular text prompt to music generation systems out there, sued by several music rights holders. Suno has 402,000 users on Discord. It was revealed recently that Suno users create an entire Spotify catalog every 2 weeks. Says this investor pitch deck that Suno used to fundraise. An interesting thing to come out of these slides from this pitch deck is that Suno, since January 2023, spent $32 million on compute and only $2,000 on the rights to data, whatever data that was. So that's a stunning admission. Udio is similarly being sued. At this time now, Suno has settled with Warner Music. I don't know about the other companies in the lawsuit, but Udio is also now settled with another company. There are other people that are suing them, other groups that are suing them. Over the pond, the Spotify of France, Deezer, announced 28% of the music being delivered to their platform is fully AI generated. They've determined somehow that it is fully AI generated. That was September of last year. Spotify deleted recently 75 million spammy tracks. Somehow these companies are determining what is AI generated or spammy. These are the, in some sense, the guardians of our online music libraries. Deezer confirms it's demonetizing the streams to its AI music because most of it is fraudulent, they've determined. Now, in November of 2024, I was contacted by a law firm to say, would you like to serve as an expert witness in a high-profile case? And I'm like, is this case Suno and Udio versus Warner Music? They're like, yes. So in discussions with them, I kept the discussion going to learn about what's going on behind the scenes. And essentially, well, I don't know if I should say, but it's a fair use argument. And I said, I don't think it's fair use at all. So, and I don't want to be the poster, person for Suno and Udio saying there's fair use. I want my face trotted on CNN to say these people are okay, it's fair use. I also don't want to be on the other side either because I don't believe the music rights holders are in the best interest of the artists. But towards the end of our conversation, I asked, how did you get my name for that? So, well, we asked an LLM. So that troubled me even more. I believe broad AI literacy is needed. And so to be a responsible citizen these days, you need to be able to vet your sources of information. It's no different for AI. And I was recently notified that the White House has a directive to promote AI literacy in America. And that was great until I realized the kind of AI literacy they're promoting is the one that's unquestioned use of AI in the context of business. You need to be able to learn how to use ChatGPT in all your daily activities. Yes, it is ChatGPT now, not Claude. But instead, AI literacy means to me that you are able to recall various definitions of AI. It's not just one thing. It's not a neutral technology. You can explain how AI models work through operationalizing the real world. And that operationalization comes with a lot of sacrifice of the meaning of things. You should be able to use AI models in appropriate ways and interpret their behaviors, critique AI model development and application, and be able to say no to AI, to these systems in your work or your personal day, and justify your decision. So that's one of my missions now, to sort of help pull me and others out of this predicament that I find ourselves in. So that is the first part. The knowledge of these LLMs vis-a-vis how they're sold, valued, and used has given me great consternation, especially as I've met more and more people that are using ChatGPT without, and other large language models without an ounce of critique or self-reflection. Now we move on to my contradictions in orthography praxis. What is orthography? Well, this is a practice of learning about the world, researching about the world through use of art, teaching, and research. And so I love to combine writing papers with creating pieces of music. And I involve this in my teaching to students, and using these algorithms and these compositions to motivate particular lesson plans. One of my contradictions that I have is my creative practice has for a long time been focused on sampling and reuse, and remixing culture. So moving in sort of an anti-intellectual property direction, which I know is somewhat utopian. But why am I against the training of these AI models, music generation models, on copyright protected music? So why shouldn't it be anyone should be able to use, culture should be open for everything? But I don't feel comfortable arguing in defense of companies that use copyright protected music. So here's an example of something I created April 2023, when I was a little more optimistic than I am now, exploring the use of Suno at this time for reimagining music of my youth and hit songs. These are hit songs from a parallel universe, and one of the first ones I did was MC Hammer.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. My music hits me so hard, makes me say, oh my Lord, thank you for blessing me with a mind to rhyme, but you hype feet. It feels good when you know you're down. A super dope homeboy from the Oak Town, and I'm known as such. And this is a beat, you can't touch. I told you, homeboy, you can't touch this. Yeah, that's how we live it, you know. You can't touch this. You can't.
So a ska, inflected, MC Hammer. Now, in my compositional practice, I do not write such music. I don't write ska, I don't really write popular music. And so after writing this and having fun, I created the video too and synchronized the video to it. And I had a lot of fun. My wife really likes this because she likes ska. But where am I in this? What have I added to this? It's finished, in essence, from the output of Suno. And I don't feel like the author. I feel like the video mixer and the prompter. So that gave me some chance to think about, well, how can I use these systems in a way that my voice remains? So fast forward to September 2025, I'm performing with some AI-generated music in a live context. Here I have the composer is a vibe specialist, which I performed in Brussels last year, remixing again material from Kenny G and commercials and other things. So it's a nice 10-minute piece, I believe improves upon Kenny G. I'm not the biggest fan of it. And I remixed, I had video mixing console there, and I was going back and forth between things, and it was a much more satisfying experience. Are we in a new era of plunderphonics? Plunderphonics is sort of this music practice pioneered by John Oswald, a Canadian composer, where he's playing with the recognizability of fragments of recorded music through recomposition. And here I'm doing this with AI-generated music, and so you're missing the memory of this in your music experience, but it's kind of like a pseudo plunderphonics, I think. Now, legally, I've looked at several opinions of legal scholars on the use of this data for training, and there's the journal, the law review in which this appears, has several different perspectives on this question. And so this one by Karis Craig, I found particularly compelling. She says that we cannot fall into the AI copyright trap. This is the mistaken conviction that copyright law is the best tool to support human creators and culture, when in fact it's likely to do more harm than good. So copyright is a false friend, in other words. She suggests that if the only real copyright problem is that the outputs of generative AI might be substantially similar to specific human authored copyright protected works, then copyright law, as we know it, already provides the solution. But for all other kinds of problems, the law may offer solutions: increased privacy laws, strengthen targeted tax laws, antitrust laws, improve cultural funding, labor laws, and she brings out universal basic income. On the other side of the debate, we have Benjamin Sobel, copyright accelerationism, that says we need to apply copyright law equally to individuals and corporations. If an individual downloaded all of the Beatles' music to become a better songwriter, they would probably be treated differently in the face of the law, in the eyes of the law, versus Suno that's downloaded everything they could get their hands on the so-called open internet. So he's suggesting that we push copyright law until its breaking point, and then we push it even further to bring in a new era of copyright law that has no contradictions or fewer contradictions. But regardless of the answer to this question, is it lawful or not? Just because these platforms may not be infringing copyright does not mean they're acting ethically. There are various efforts to address moral failings of companies. One is pioneered by Ed Newton-Rex, who worked for Stability AI and had a rather public falling out, leaving the company when they would not commit to not training their systems on copyright protected music. And he's got this statement on AI training. He's lobbying the Parliament and the House of Lords in the UK. He's the one responsible for this so-called silent album, contributed by many artists, protesting the use of their music for training these systems. Another effort is by Martin Clancy, who's promoting his AIOK symbol. A company says, I would like to apply for recognition on my on our use of AI, and you come in, you audit the use of data in their training and their use of models online, and you get this stamp of approval that tells clients that this is an AIOK platform. We see AI music companies positioning themselves to say, we're doing ethical AI, we do it right. We're teaming up to create ethical licensed AI music, and we are committed to responsible and creative use, ethical use of AI in vocal cloning. Udio is partnering with other companies to check for infringements, and UMG, Universal Music Group, is working together with Suno to have somehow an ethical environment of their applications. So we are in a Napster moment. I was at Stanford when Napster came out, and it was a remarkable thing to have access to an enormous amount of music and be able to download it. I spent many nights late learning about music I'd never heard of before that I still have in my library and carry with me. So we're in a similar kind of moment where industry's trying to catch up, the law's trying to catch up. You have rights holders together with songwriters, together with producers fighting for fairness within the marketplace. And so we had, do not reproduce, do not pirate. And are we headed to this? Do not generate new music. It is illegal to generate music with these models because they're trained on copyright protected music. I still haven't resolved that contradiction, by the way. So that's also what leads me to some trouble. I am fascinated by the possibilities that AI has opened up in my music and have enjoyed exploring it in my musical work. So how can I continue to explore it, but not contribute to the hype? Do I keep my music offline and just keep it within my private context? In one case, as a composer, I'd never really paid attention to text in music, and I never really appreciated text. I never listened to lyrics, for instance. But with the modality of these text prompting systems, you're required to use text to describe what you want. And therein, through that practice, through the experience, I developed a sensitivity to lyrics and textual content of music. And so in December 2023, when I was relatively optimistic, I explored the geographical fugue text of Arndt's talk and put into Suno and looked at the variety of transformations and settings I can get from it.
Und der Fluss Mississippi und die Stadt Honolulu und der See Titicaca. Der Popocatépetl liegt nicht in Kanada, sondern in Mexiko, Mexiko, Mexiko. Kanada, Malaga, Rimini, Brindisi. Kanada, Malaga, Rimini, Brindisi. Ja, Athen, 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 Nagasaki, Yokohama, Nagasaki, Yokohama.
So that's the entire text, devoid of emotional meaning. It's relatively neutral. And it's been used in what's called the geographic fugue, which involved a series of singers reciting this text in a really interesting way. And so I've got 7 different settings of this text in a variety of different qualities. I became much more of a composer with the materials, the sound materials, and making sense of it and putting it together in this whole.
So that first one that you showed us, was that AI generated or was that a report?
The first setting?
The first one.
Yeah, it was AI generated.
That's the first one that you generated?
It's, I don't know if it was the first one I generated. I generated maybe 10 different ones and then selected from those, curating. But I mean, you have a variety of different. Let's see. Different ones, but the same lyrics. And another interesting thing.
Did you submit that to Eurovision?
No, I didn't. But if you listen to this one.
Nagasaki, Yokohama, Nagasaki, Yokohama.
So for Nagasaki, Yokohama, it all of a sudden went to pentatonic, which is kind of a naff, I think a cringy decision on the parts of the system. Hit Songs from Parallel Universes is a performance of 3 remixed popular music tracks, and I synchronized it with videos from my childhood. I created a piece called Music Salads and performed this in Vienna with a colleague of mine, where there were no visuals involved here. So it was purely kind of mixing live electroacoustic music, and he made a salad during the second movement and went into the audience to take orders during the third movement, and we dress up as chefs in that. I created an album exploring these systems with the material in my spam folder. So using that as text to sort of explore with these text-driven music generation systems. And yeah, here's one of the emails.
Hi dear, I hope this email finds you well. Please confirm if you get my previous one. I am following up about a profitable business proposal. I believe it will be beneficial for both parties. I believe it will be beneficial for both parties. I do believe
And it's an earworm. It sticks in my head and it stays there, and I love this song and I hate that I love it. But one of the outcomes that I did not anticipate through this project was to start to develop feels for my spammers. They became human. I wanted to learn about this proposal from this person. So can these tools still be used ethically? Another composer that's exploring this is Fivos Pelias in Berlin. He's a Greek composer, and he's created a piece called Fake, an electroacoustic binaural multi-channel piece. Composed from what he says is collective memory. You know, these models are representing some kind of collective memory, and he's prompted them with his own audio that he's created, and then created this piece Fake from it. And you can see his Ableton project involves a lot of work to put it together. And he developed a method where he was working with spreadsheets, recording his thoughts on the quality of particular outputs, and assembled this piece, a really nice 7-minute piece. Now, can you use these systems still ethically? A really great blog post that got me thinking by Emily Bender was Friends Don't Let Friends Prompt. And she made the point that every time you use these systems, you are sort of robbing yourself of an opportunity to practice your craft, but you're also voting in favor of the next new data center. Every time you interact with these systems, you are telling the company that you are enjoying using it, and that this continuous clicks, are votes in favor of the system. So what to do? In their book, they say, don't underestimate the power of saying no. And I think we've also seen that in the past week with the ChatGPT protest. A lot of people are saying no and stopping their subscription to this due to recent political events. There's an interesting practice of resistance going on. Algorithmic Resistance Research Group, or ARG, describes the critically engaged artists are Janus-faced. It means they have a face on the front and the back, forced to embody two contradictory positions regarding the combination of art and technology. One side mistrusts the technology while the other becomes intimate with its functions through deep usage. And it really is through my usage of these systems that I've developed a deep intuition for what it feels like to create music with this. What are the creative challenges I face with it? Sitting with feelings of releasing an album of somewhat AI generated, although I put a lot of myself into the album. What did that experience go like? The artist's dilemma is how to engage with these platforms from a critical position without extending the spectacle, reinforcing the industry that creates them, or emphasizing stereotypes, illusions of technical proficiency, the looting of other artists' works that drives their business models. Now, I've taken this heart to heart in a couple albums that I have produced. After the Spam Folder album, I had a feeling to cleanse myself of this. So I created this album of 12 tracks. A Difficult Christmas. The first track is trying to get Suno, or no, it was Udio, to produce something that sounded unpracticed, unpolished, and unproduced by a violinist, a beginning violin student. And it couldn't. I could not create anything that sounded different from a professional violin in a nice studio. And so, as in my contribution to the research world, I then recorded myself for an hour playing fiddle, which I don't play, by ear, my favorite Christmas tunes. Here's a meditation on the theme by Elvis Presley. Okay, and now with this album on Bandcamp, any AI system that downloads it and says, cease, it's a theme by Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley will now be linked to this track. Music Flamingo is a very recent system by NVIDIA, a revolutionary AI model that understands music at a deeper level, analyzing harmony, rhythm, emotions, instruments, just like a trained music expert. What is it going to make of my theme by Elvis Presley? So I asked it, here's the track, break it down like a critic, explain why it should be the next viral Christmas hit. And it said, this high energy, genre blending piece fuses contemporary electronic production with a pop rock sensibility, instantly accessible. The song moves at a brisk 166.7 BPM, is rooted in C minor. The arrangement is built around a tight, punchy drum program that locks in high tempo dance pop. The lead is a male tenor. There's no singing voice in this. And the vocal is treated to subtle delay. What are the lyrics? It's the excitement of Christmas with loved ones. The repeated hook, I'm so excited for Christmas, I'm so excited for Christmas, I'm so excited. So this can be an idea for the next Christmas album. Then last year, we created a follow-up to this, Ens for Jul, which means a difficult Christmas in Swedish. And now we have a pianist and a violin, unpracticed, unproduced. We just put a Zoom recorder right there and we played for an hour our favorite Christmas tunes. Here's O Come All Ye Faithful, not in the style of Nat King Cole. Again, I tried to have Udio create the sound of our duets unpracticed, unpolished, unproduced, and it couldn't. So again, this is a contribution to learn about it. Flamingo had contemporary classical piece, chamber music sensibility. Grand piano, okay, got the piano and the violin, high fidelity microphones. No, that was just a single Zoom recorder. The violin weaves melodic lines that rise and fall, espresso, rubato. My latest piece of sonic or resistance is this one. There was a call for papers and music at the IEEE Big Data Workshop 2025. And the beginning text of this call said, music can touch the hearts of any audience without them possessing knowledge of its context. Its power is transcendental. It stems from timbre of the instruments, rhythmic structure, dynamics, etc. It cooperates some form of harmony. Music is not only from instruments, but also nature. We have elegant songs by birds. We have enchanting waterfalls. This really kind of bugged me because we have a group of engineers that have no idea about music outside of this really sentimental, romantic, outdated notions. They had a call, AI-based music composition competition. And so compositions comprised of original or human-enhanced AI-generated scores, lyrics, etc., and submission of AI music for compositions. So we decided to do something about this, our own sonic manifesto of resistance. So we got a bunch of aerophones. We went into our data GPU center, cluster center, where it's 86 dB noise level. And for 45 minutes, we recorded ourselves in this acoustic environment, playing these aerophones with the same air that's used to cool the GPUs. Sometimes you can hear us, sometimes you can't. There, we moved around the space, sat in different positions. Here's a sonogram of the first 11 minutes. The first 5 minutes involves just sitting with the noise. And it actually is kind of a beautiful noise. We can see the drones. Stockholm is known for drone music, by the way. We see drones here. We see this one little, I don't know what this is, this GPU going up and down. And then after 5 minutes, we produce our first tone. That tone happened to be in a tonality that was matching the sound of the GPUs. Here's what it sounded like. But much louder. Kind of hear us. It's somewhat of an allegory of humans versus machines, of course. It's also, it looks at the futurists. And so we created this 45-minute piece. And in mixing it, actually, my colleague who's collaborating, Elin, was playing it on her home speakers. And her husband said, "Oh, what's that sound? It reminds me, it brings back good memories of the time I was experimenting with mining crypto." So that was something that we had never intended to do, to create these warm, fuzzy feelings. So we submitted it, and then they changed the rules after we submitted it. The piece can't be more than 10 minutes long, and it has to involve some algorithmic process. That's fine. This work has been accepted to the International Computer Music Conference 2026, where we will present it. So finally, the third contradiction here is many of the courses I teach in the university and the students I supervise focus on AI and machine learning, but I want to resist contributing to this workforce. So what do? This is an existential crisis, at the heart of my teaching. And in particular, I was taken with this text, The Eye of the Master, which provides a history of AI from the perspective of labor automation. And that the project of AI has emerged from this automation of psychometrics and labor all the way back to Babbage and before, rather than the quest to solve the enigma of intelligence. It's never about intelligence. It's been about moving power from the artisans and the crafts people in the factory floor to the master of the factory, where the individuals are doing a single task on the factory line, and they're specialized in that single task, but the intelligence is distributed over the system. And so that's been effective on having me rethink my teaching. How do I incorporate lessons of active resistance, of, in Swedish, it's called heat snack bullshits, within the courses? I tried to swear at least once in each course in Swedish so the students are paying attention. So that has been my journey through the MUSAiC project and beyond. I am troubled, as I'm sure many of us are. I'm experiencing an existential crisis. My orthography is now centered on resistance with these systems. Have I become radicalized? This is something that sort of is keeping me up. Am I becoming a conspiracy theorist? I'm constantly having to reflect and test my own assumptions. Possible resolutions to my crises I can accept. I can perform indulgences. So every time I click on, Suna or Ubio to create something, I can pay some music on Bandcamp to an artist. So that sort of indulgence pattern. I can become a parasitic resistance, perform parasitic resistance. I can maybe work from within the companies or within the platforms themselves to resist somehow. And that is in some sense what I'm doing with the Difficult Christmas albums. The third album, of course, for Christmas, the Difficult Christmas this year will involve 3 musicians. And I will continue until we have, maybe 100 musicians. I could totally reject these tools. I don't think that's realistic. Same with acceptance. I can go small data local compute. I can only work on systems that will fit on my computer or on my single GPU in my office and working with my own data instead of building on foundational models. So that's another thing I'm exploring as a possible way to resist. And so that's my trouble for you. And I hope I haven't increased your trouble. And I do think there is hope. I do think music will still exist in 20 years, 30 years. It's part of our fabric. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But powers are shifting. Things are shifting. Thank you very much for your attention. And everyone